Now, South Africa will have a new political party, and it's called Unite for Change. Now, it will be registered as a new political party to contest the upcoming 2026 local government elections, which, of course, come up next year. Now, Build One South Africa, Rise Mzansi, and the Good Party have merged to form this new political party, and the announcement was made yesterday in Rosebank, north of Johannesburg. The party has pledged to deliver sustainable basic services, to ensure safety and justice, and also to eliminate corruption. But for more about Unite for Change, we're joined in studio by the leadership, Mmusi Maimane, who is, of course, of Bosa. We have Patricia De Lille of the Good Party and Songezo Zibi of Rise Mzansi. Thanks so much and welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you. Good morning and thank you.
Thanks UFC, people have said, and is the fight going to be outside, inside the party? But what led to all of this in a nutshell? You know, I want to give each of you a minute just to give us a sense from your respective party positions in terms of why this has come about. Mmusi, I'll start with you.
I think it comes at a time in South Africa where people are desperate for change. I think all of us have seen our municipalities fall apart, collapse. It also comes at a time where I think citizens are asking for a new way to be governed with new leaders that are able to bring about that change, because I think citizens feel like they want to bring their own candidates forward. And so as the three parties and inviting many other South Africans, we're saying in owning this moment, especially at a local government, because at a local government, pre-coalitions are then possible. You can decide in this ward, this is the best candidate, so that you don't have three candidates fighting each other or more. You can bring them together, put the best candidate forward, and ultimately ensure that our cities are governed differently. And I think this is a moment in South Africa that we need to own. And naturally, the parties continue the work that they do in Parliament. But more than anything, we need to, if you like, rescue our cities, rescue our municipalities, and bring change.
Patricia?
Thank you, Sakina. Yes, you know, our democracy are beginning to settle. And we did research, and we've seen that, you know, there's the fragmentation of especially opposition voters. They rotate amongst the same opposition parties. And that doesn't bring about unity and strength. But we also felt that we must put a proposition to South Africans when it comes to local government about governance and service delivery that's interdependent. And then also, it's not just about the delivering the service, but also the people, the leaders. So we want to bring more young people in. You know, now it's the time for young people to get that exposure, to learn how government works, but also pulling our resources together and putting a proposition to South Africans that says that if we are united, we are stronger. So we are inviting other political parties with this, that shares the same values, the same principles, to come and join us. Because this is the moment. We can't go on. Our economy is in crisis, local government is in crisis, and that's where the state is closer to the people at local level. And local politics is determining also our national politics. And if there were some differences, we had been talking for months, we decided to rise above any differences and put our country first.
Okay,
yes, thank you.
Second is a response to what voters say all the time. There are too many political parties, but in particular in the case of these three and a few other political parties, people ask, why don't you guys work together? I get that question all the time. I'm sure Mmusi and Patricia get that question all the time. It's important to respond to that call. The second thing is that because the local government election is fought on a ward-by-ward basis and it's first past the post, when you've got too many political parties per ward, you end up with a party that won 32% winning, because the other political parties that were also competing were too fragmented in that formula. And the third is that we also believe it is possible to invite people who are currently outside politics, who want to drive the change, because there is no single political party in South Africa that has got all the people that can fix the problem. even when you combine as many political parties as possible, the capacity is not there. This is an opportunity for South Africans to step up and step forward and lead and become mayors and councillors and so on. So our campaign is not going to be premised only on our members. There's an open invitation to South Africans of capability to also get involved.
So South Africans would say, you know, they've seen several new beginnings over the past 30-odd years in our political landscape. Why is this going to be different, Mmusi?
I think, one, it articulates a generational space. I think we've seen the new beginnings that are fragmentation of liberation politics. They're fragments that come from the old. This wants to put forward an offering that is new for a new generation for the future. The second is on the question of policy and the ethics of leadership. We are going to be investing significantly on looking at, when we genuinely talk about revitalize the local economy, what does that mean? How do we digitize local economies? What new economies do we come on board? Thirdly, it's the selection process that speaks to how people are selected. Political parties often will tell you they're new, but in fact, they're recycling people or ultimately superimposing their own, branch committee people on the citizens to say, this is your council. What we're saying is, let's go back to the people. Let them be centered around who they nominate. Let them put themselves at the center. Let citizens nominate. Because ultimately, like I say, this is but the first. We've got to bring on more. There's faith-based organizations, there's civil society, there are many others who need to come on. And I think this moment, in some ways, is a harking back to what happens when you want to bring a transition in a country and say to ourselves, if you think about pre-94, you had a number of citizens work together to be able to defeat that and bring about that change. Now we're saying everyone is sick and tired of the collapse of their municipalities. We want an economy that grows. Can we reenact that same moment, bring on more people, bring on more citizens to be able to catapult the change going forward? So I think it's a most powerful opportunity, and uniquely so. The new offerings, as I say, have been started by focused on individuals, etc. This is about us setting aside differences, as Patricia has just said, to say, let's work together for that new offering for the future.
All right, so with that new offering, who's going to lead the new offering? And understanding very clearly, as you pointed out, that the door's still open for others to join. But people want to know, as the founding members, who's going to lead this party? Because here you're sitting as 3 strong individuals already. Yeah. Others may join. Who's going to lead?
Well, Sakina, we've looked at past coalitions or moonshot pacts and all of that. And the mistake there was that when people started talking about uniting, the first discussion was who's going to be the leader. We said no. You should build those capacity and bring young people and leaders in. We started off by saying that we are a leadership council. So there's no one that's a leader or the particular leader. And the leadership council consists of 6 people until we get more people to join us. And exactly to avoid the issue that leadership does not stand in the way of uniting.
So you're going to rule by consensus?
We're going to rule by consensus, by debating, by consulting. After this, the real work starts, because now we have to get out there on the ground.
So what happens to your logo going into the next local government elections? Whose face are we going to see? Nobody? 6 people? 8 people?
Well, again,
no, so Sakina, let me say this. The obsession is always with leadership in South Africa. There are several important questions before you get to the question of leadership. Firstly, in this process, there are other political parties and organizations that must still come in. You can't settle the question of leadership between the 3 of us. You need to have and approve a constitution, as an example. You need to decide what organizational culture you're going to build, what kind of people you want in the organization, what is your political program, how do you interact with citizens. You need to do those building blocks first. What happens in South African politics from the get-go, the squabble is about who is going to be the leader, and we need to change that mindset in South African politics. I also see it on social media. Who's your leader? When is your elective conference? This is precisely what has destroyed politics. We have to build the organization first, build a culture, build structures, and then it's democracy from below, because you now have the structures. Because the same people ask you, yeah, but who elected you? Right? So you can't have it both ways. You've got to put the building blocks in place so that you can then have the internal democracy. Otherwise, you appoint yourselves as the three people.
I think, Sakina, the other thing that is important to always be clear about is that, especially at local government, you and I, we don't interact with the president. We interact with our ward council. That's the first person that we direct. So to answer your question, if you say what's on the ballot, your ballot in your ward will have your local councillor's name under UFC, who's a candidate that hopefully you would have been a part of nominating. We've worked through a process of ensuring that there's integrity, transparency, and it's the most competent person that you can put forward. Your next line is naturally who's going to be your mayor. As we sit here in Johannesburg, we can think hard about who's the mayor of Johannesburg. Are we comfortable as citizens about this revolving door of multiple layers or of multiple mayors? Every month it feels like there's a brand new one. So if that is the case, surely, even if you might say the leader is person X, how is that solved the people of Johannesburg's problem? My fundamental point is this, is that particularly at local government, let's put those structures in place. Let's make sure the leadership really is about those candidates, and let's ensure that the mayoral leadership is what people say, this is my person who I'm going to hold accountable. And when the water isn't coming, I don't phone some leader sitting elsewhere. Let the mayor respond, let the councillor respond.
And if the mayor doesn't respond, and if the councillor doesn't respond, who do we come to at UFC? Do we call all 8 of you, 6 of you? Because it's also about knowing where to go when it comes to accountability.
Yeah.
Because we often hear about collective responsibility and accountability, but that also makes it difficult to pin something down when there is need for accountability.
Correct. And I think one of the contractual obligations that a councillor enters into is not only with their community, but with the leadership collective, but also on a set of criteria that says to them, you will deliver on the following things. And I can assure, and I'd believe that we'd be at one at this, I can assure citizens, when a councillor does not fulfill that obligation,
accountability, we must hold
they
them
must be removed. And the people must make sure that they trigger those actions, and we will back the people because they must. But
how are you going to remove the councillor? Because what does the Constitution say at the moment? It's one of the most difficult things is to remove a councillor from their position. Does the Constitution make provision for that?
It's not difficult, Sakina, by the way, to remove a councillor.
How
because
not?
The organization has, remember, one of the reasons I said earlier, you need to have a constitution, you need to have organizational rules and organizational culture. There are expectations that the organization needs to set. So you contract with the organization in terms of what your obligations as a councillor is. If you don't meet those obligations, your organization disciplines you. And in terms of internal process, you may be removed as a councillor.
From your PR list?
From your PR list, yes. You may be removed. You can be removed even as a ward councillor.
How do you remove councillors? Why haven't they been removed to date? Why haven't they been removed when they are performing poorly?
Because political patronage has trumped principle. So what eventually happens is that in many parties, that's why parties have this issue, is that you've got members of members and they're aligned to the leader, and therefore the disciplinary processes get bundled. First of all, if you lose your membership of an organization, you lose your seat in council. It's a straightforward like that. It's not complicated. And therefore, through a fair and a process, you say to me, candidate X in Ward Y is no longer working. Once there's due process that's been in place, you say that membership is terminated, which effectively means they cannot be a councillor. And I'd rather face a by-election in that context rather than one where we sit down with crooks, people looting from people, corrupt, and then you keep going. Let's be effective, because if you talk about ethics and leadership, it's firstly in the supply component. So the first layer of accountability is that you don't hide lists. Make them transparent. Make sure people know, so that you are selecting the best to start. And then following on from that, if those people do not deliver on the mandate, the constitution and the process, we are busy in the moment drafting the nomination regulations. It will trigger a manner upon which you can terminate membership. And once that membership is terminated, you need to elect a new council.
So what is your realistic expectation of how you want to perform in next year's local government election?
I think, Sakina, that, first of all, we need to look at the general problem in South Africa, and that is unemployment, poverty, inequality. And then you look at cities and towns. They are the drivers of change in any society. Look at Johannesburg. They've got a budget of 89 billion rand. 8.7 billion of that is for infrastructure. We will split that infrastructure budget and say 40% must go to maintenance and repairs. And so it's an infrastructure-led growth. And then 60% can go towards new infrastructure. But then the economies in cities, we must exploit and use the creative economy, the digital economy, the care economy, tourism, new things, in the service sectors that can bring more jobs. I walked around with Josie Majosi last week here in Johannesburg, and to see the work that they have done in Marshalltown right down to Gandhi Square. And at the back of it, it's led by the creative industry. So we need to think differently about, regenerating cities. But if you don't have the correct leadership there, that is there to serve, you end up with the problems that we have now. So our expectation is to build a foundation and a base through local government. Show our strength there, and then continue to build for 2029.
Using Johannesburg as an example, given what you guys have already discussed on a preliminary basis, are there any candidates emerging? Because we're hearing names all over the show about people who will be running for the mayor of Johannesburg.
I think it's appropriate that we run an open and transparent process in terms of who's the mayoral candidate, who is a councillor candidate, both for the ward and PR lists. Because it's important that we change the culture of South African politics. Democracy is a stock fair. If you don't put any money in, you get nothing out. And one of the big messages yesterday is that this is an opportunity for South Africans to step up and lead. By leading, we mean govern. So I would have to see people saying, I am putting up my hand to run for mayor of Johannesburg. And we have an embarrassment of talent in Johannesburg, where there are lots of people with serious education, experience in business.
Why do you think they haven't put their hands up hitherto?
Because South Africa's political culture doesn't allow it. It's inward focused. If you're not a member and you belong to a faction, you're out.
And people don't want to be tainted with corruption. South Africans are sick and tired of corruption. They're looting our country. And people who have worked very hard to build their integrity and their reputation over years, they don't want to be associated with those kind of things. And so corruption also, that's why we want ethical leadership that can deal with corruption.
It's also, think about it from a professional's perspective. Here I am soldiering at a bank or soldiering at whatever institution I am. And now I want to stand for public service. But then when I come into that space, I work in certain instances. To be honest with you, talent attraction into the political space is often hampered, sometimes not only by the patronage and all of those issues, just the nature of the work conditions, the place upon which people are reporting to people who are incompetent at times. You find yourself being insulted, as we are watching now in the Madlanga Commission, professional people being told to do illegal and fairly corrupt and idiotic things. No professional is going to put up with that. No professional is going to sit back and say, I want to work for someone I disrespect. And on the second instance, when you look at the political infrastructure, you've got to make it possible that in fact the best go to the top, not the best connected, the best talent. Because in typical politics, the most connected, they maneuver their way all the way to the top. What you want is remove this idea that for you to serve your country, you need to be politically connected. We need to introduce the idea that we move away from this freedom-based narrative, you know, the political mobilization in simple, to a place where we say, let's bring into a governance framework where the best can run our cities and be able to provide leadership there. So let's allow even a generation of young people who maybe for them, they never fought the struggle, but they fought a different, they are fighting a new struggle today of economic exclusion, of many of the issues that we've been talking about, and let's allow them to come into the front.
How do you respond to people who say that the only reason you are forming this new political party is because in your individual parties, you have failed to gain popular support across the South African electorate? Around 1% collectively in last year's general election was garnered by your three parties. How do you respond to that?
You know, the response is, you've got two patterns in South African politics. Political parties that are declining, the old political parties. The ANC lost over 10 percentage points of its support in the previous election. They're sitting at around 40%. The other political parties that you have in South Africa are fragments of they are externalized factions of the ANC. The EFF is, the MKP is. I can go on and on. That is the reality of South African politics. People still must get used to the idea of a new alternative. And we believe that we are in that, in that moment. It's incredibly difficult to start a political party. And the comparison usually is with a 113-year-old political party, comparing a party that is 1 year old. The Democratic Alliance in 1994, as a DP, had 1.3%. If that is the argument then, that if you don't start big as a faction of the ANC, then you failed, it's an argument that doesn't work. Most South Africans do not vote, Sakina, at all. They sit at home. That's the majority. All of us have a responsibility to pool our resources and go and talk to those South Africans and bring them back into political activity so that they can vote for the future that they deserve.
But how are you going to achieve it here?
We also need voter education. People must understand the value of their vote. The only way you can get rid of the mess that we are in our towns, in cities. We live in a democracy. Those people have been voted in by us. And the only way to remove them and get a better government is to vote them out. There's no other way. So I think the IEC must also step up substantially on voter education. Parties must do voter education, explain to people the value of their vote. And that's what we're also planning to do. You know, there's a big percentage of South Africans who are registered, who've not voted in the last election, because they feel they don't trust politicians, they don't trust political parties. We have to convince them to say, your vote, every single vote matters. And that is what we want to empower.
An indictment that includes your political parties as well. And as you said, Songezo, people, the electorate generally, you know, seem to be averse to coming out to the polls of late for whatever reason. But that being said, goes back to my question. With people not voting, with people not seeing a credible alternative, your three parties included, how are you hoping to change the fortune by combining these three parties?
That is the very essence of, firstly, why you combine. But the most important distinctive here is citizens must vote for the people they put forward. And the distinctive here is, let me take a civil society organization. It is sitting elsewhere. It is not contesting for political power. It is agitating because it needs water in a city. Believe you me, water reticulation is a competence of local government. It is not going to be changed by simply just continue. The advocacy work has to be done, and I agree with them. Now what I'm saying to those advocacy groups, put forward your candidate and back that candidate. Because then you're not dealing in an electoral pool that is simply set up to be fragmented amongst the current political infrastructure. You're then dealing with an electoral pool that is expanding beyond just the politics. And that's why local government matters. Because in that instance, if you're an organization in Dobsonville, in Soweto, in Rosebank, you then can put forward your people, and if they're competent, if they're good, and they stand for election, and you back them and they work, you are then putting yourself at the center of the governance response in the country, rather than typically. So what we're in many ways saying is that whilst we're 3 political parties, it is an insufficient threshold, because you need more. You need civil society, you need others. That's why this initiation bit is an open invitation in a process that will culminate with more citizens, a diversity of voices, and a better participation that comes from people who maybe have not been in politics. I think it's the old dictum. Politics is far too important to be left up to politicians. And so, yes, we've got to bring on more. And I think we started to see some of the seeds of that. When I think about some of the people who are serving even in the various political parties, many of them were not in politics. I can think of people like Ayanda Ali. I can think about people like Vuiso. I can think about so many others. They were not in politics. But we went out, and as respective, now we're trying to harmonize that, make it bigger, and say, let's bring on more people who are not political to come and serve in the political space. And new is a generational issue that focuses on the future. That's the job.
Are you at all concerned about the confusion that will exist, given that your full unification will only happen in 2029, given the explanation you gave yesterday regarding having to still fulfill your parliamentary obligations as individual parties while contesting next year the local government elections under one banner? Are you concerned about that sort of confusion that may arise?
I think we don't give voters a lot more credit. In Botswana, there's a new government. It's exactly this kind of formula, by the way. Several political parties have come together under one banner and contested an election. Voters are a lot smarter than we usually think. They can work these things out. When you explain things to people, I've been in several meetings. I was in Mthatha last Wednesday with some of our members and leadership there. I explained what you're doing. They get the logic. They're like, oh, we can go and fetch so-and-so from that organization now and so-and-so to run. And in that one, it can be so-and-so. And you'll explain to people that these parties are working together to elect the best candidate. The message is not that complicated, Sakina, right? If you keep at it and you are consistent and you execute on what you said you would do diligently. I need to make this point. It's really important that we change the culture of South African politics. It's poisonous. It is toxic. The reason people don't vote is that political parties don't open themselves up to challenge and participation by people who are not members of those political parties. They are insular. And therefore people feel you're going to put up a group of candidates. I had nothing to do with it. You want me to vote for you, and then I never see you again. What we are trying to do is we're reversing that trend and saying, if you know someone in your community who should be councillor, put their name forward, because you know what will happen? The people from the same community will mobilize and campaign for that person to be a councillor. Those culture shifts take time, they really do. In Botswana, they tried, was it 3 elections?
3 elections.
On the 3rd election, they had worked. So we also have to have the patience. You have to. You really have to, Sakina. You can't. Otherwise, what do you have? You've got fragmentation, 5, 6 political parties, which are different versions of the ANC.
Okay.
Which means nothing changes.
Then, of course, when it comes to your constitution, how are you going to go about that and ultimately your manifesto going into next year's local government elections? Will you be looking at your 3 individual parties and putting together a document based on all of your strong individual sets, or how are you going to compose that?
Well, we live in a rights-based society, so any constitution must be aligned to rights. We live in a country where we respect the rule of law. So constitutionalism is key. So in putting a constitution together, it must be in the context of the broader rights base that we have. And we are looking at that. Excuse me, we started to look at putting a constitution together. I can give you an example of the good constitution. 2 years ago, at our national conference, the highest decision-making body, the delegates were really visionary. They said, look, this is where South Africa is moving towards now. And we have to change our constitution to allow our leadership to start talking to other like-minded parties so that we can unite. That was 2 years ago. And today we've got a mandate. So mandates is very important. So that constitution must provide that the leadership operate within that mandate. It's very important. That's the basis, is like your Bible. We will all be subject to the same constitution.
I think also, again, you don't just open for people to stand for public office. You must also open for people who are policy experts. I may have a qualification in economics, for argument's sake. Patricia has served in local government, Songezo has served in different aspects of business, etc. That's limited experience. You need other people who have dealt with climate and etc. So volunteerism in the country cannot just be limited to public office. It must also be, if I have an idea, let me come and put it forward. Let me participate here. So there are a couple of things that are going to happen sequentially from henceforth. The one is, obviously, the nomination regulations will come forward. We'll be getting together to be able to work on some of the policy issues so that we put an offering. Part of the memorandum of understanding amongst parties, etc., does begin to reflect some of the elements that will go into the constitution of the new formation as it goes, because an MOU has to be signed with new parties that are coming on board. And then furthermore, as candidates are coming forward and manifesto and their work of what is a distinctive, you'll then begin to see those elements. And so ultimately, the constitution will not only, as Patricia correctly says, born out of a broader constitution in the country, it will also be a sense of saying to ourselves, here's the version of a modernized political party and offering going forward. And so that work is being done.
Which would be very interesting, given some of your policy positions individually, like the basic income grant that the Good Party, for example, is very clear, very strong on. How does your party, Bosa, how does Mzansi, feel about that particular situation?
So, Sakina, the beauty of this is that local government is about universal issues that are important to people. I think it's important that we also make provision for two things. One, other political parties and groups are going to come with more issues. You need to give yourself time to work through those issues until you get to a position where you've got common policy positions. We forget, Patricia knows better about it than I do, from the 1980s when COSATU was formed. The journey towards policy coherence between COSATU's different unions, given that some of them were aligned to black consciousness like the NUM, others were aligned to the ANC and so on, took time. We also need to be patient with these things. Local government is a really good proving ground because the issues are very simple. Do I have water in my home? Is it clean or is it going to make me sick? Do I have electricity? Is it expensive? Is the rubbish getting collected? Are houses being built? Are they high quality and so on? These are things that you can agree on.
Where are they being built? Spatial questions, very important.
Yes.
Sure. So these are things that you need to
and these are not
ideological.
These are not, no, but we agree. These are not ideological questions. That's the point. That's where you build the muscle of working together, working through policy issues and things, so that you then graduate to the more difficult national questions that you're going to have to deal with. So there's no need to pressurize ourselves. Otherwise, you never come together because you're trying to work through a long spreadsheet of issues where you've got to tick every box.
Yeah, but voters are also very impatient. You know, they want to ask you a question today and have an answer today. They don't want you to tell them that you are still going to work through it.
You know,
so for example,
I ran a city for more than 8 years, a big city. And I can tell you now that the problems of our people at local government knows no political affiliation. If you don't have water, if you don't have a piece of land, if you don't have a house, doesn't matter what political party. And that is the value of local government. You depoliticize the issues.
So, quick one. Patricia De Lille, Mayor of Cape Town, felt very strongly about building affordable housing
in the inner city.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree with that as Rise?
No, but hang on, Sakina, remember.
It's very briefly in principle.
No, hang on.
Do you agree with that in principle?
No, but Sakina, that's not the correct question to ask in this case, because we said we're going to have manifestos for each of the cities.
Fair, but I'm just testing now how far apart you may be at this point. So in principle, do you agree
we agree
that there should be affordable housing in the inner city of Cape Town, Johannesburg, close to working opportunities?
Absolutely, Sakina. We've said that in our manifesto, that South Africans should stay close to where they work, which means you've got to have affordable housing in the inner city and close to industrial areas. The specifics of how you do that, it becomes a subject of the debate between ourselves.
Fabmost, Sakina, I have one question for them. Where does their funding come from and why, Mmusi?
Funding in this instance for this entity, I'd like to invite for citizens to get into the culture of funding political parties. There has been, to answer a question, which is to say people say there are donors who are instructing this thing. That's not the case. It's not the case at all, I want to be clear.
So Unite for Change doesn't have any funders right now?
Let people come on board, fund it so that it can be able to be an effective. And leaving from here, we all will go and try and raise money for the entity, and that's the job that we've got to do. That's the job of leadership.
And there's the question that I think we've just canvassed. Kolisi, who asked, what is their party ideology? They have a veteran in De Lille, an organizer in Dr. Maimane, and think tank in Zibi.
You know what, Sakina, the center of politics is empty. Because those that were in the center moved far right, conservative, and others moved to the left. So there's a space in the center. And, you know, I personally, I'm a social democrat. And so we want to occupy that center space in terms of an ideology.
Okay.
But once again, when it comes to local government, ideology is not important. Our people want water, electricity, and services.
We will argue at a later stage that it actually is important, but we don't have time now. We are out of time, but very quickly, what does success look like?
Success looks like us electing ethical people in more councils across the country. That's what success is.
Success for me is that South Africans must never give up hope. We must continue to have hope and put your hope in Unite for Change.
Success is in thousands of South Africans standing up and saying, I want to be a councillor in my area.
Well, there you have it, the new political formation in South Africa. Minister Patricia De Lille from Good Party, Songezo Zibi from Rise of Mzansi, and of course Mmusi Maimane from Bosa, speaking about merging to form Unite for Change.